Okay, fellow Cummins owners out there that are looking to do a 12 valve swap into a common rail 3rd gen truck. This is a 2005 3500. I'm just going to do a general overview real quick. I'm not going to go into detail because I want to keep this short so that people can just kind of browse through and find what they're looking for. Purpose of this is just to give you an idea of how much time and energy goes into one of these if it's something that you want to tackle, which may make this a little bit longer of a video, but I do want to get it out there so people that are thinking about this can actually do it, and then I'll break it down into better sections later on that go into detail. One of the biggest things that you see out there on the YouTube or on the Cummins forums and whatnot, different areas on the that are talking about doing these swaps are things like motor mounts and cutting and welding the frame. We did not choose to go that route. What we have, just real quick, and I'll discuss this in further detail, is a spacer plate that allows you to use the front two. You can see the motor mount back there. There's the old, that's using the front hole on the back. So the front hole on the motor mount with the back hole on the engine block with a plate of 1/4-inch steel behind it. And it allows you to use, without cutting or welding the motor mounts, grinding anything off your truck, allows you to put this engine and make sure that it's spaced exactly right to still mate up with your transmissions. So we did that. We just used a piece of 1/4-inch steel that goes up and hooks into the front of the motor mount bolt holes, and then it just spaces it out to give you the common rail space. Okay, so another thing that you see a lot of is intercooler piping. There's a lot of different ways, but just so you can see that the average guy can do this, this is a 647114 on an industrial manifold, so that we get the benefit of using the factory exhaust system with just an adapter in between the two. That comes up into a factory boost elbow over here, and then goes in a straight, this is about 18 inches long, with a 3-inch elbow here. It's a 45. It goes down into this piping. We just ran the piping straight down into the intercooler, factory intercooler. None of that really gets very messy at all. And then you can use the factory 05 elbow over there. It is not the world's best fit. Someday I'd probably like to take that out and custom make a piece for that. But it's gone about 5,000 or 6,000 miles since we've done the swap. No real issues. Factory 12 valve intake manifold. In this truck, this is a 180 horse P-pump. It has a Hamilton 188-220 cam inside there. The cylinder head, even though it doesn't look like much, is ported about at stage 2. I'll be doing more videos on how we did that. It took us a little while and 100 hours of educating ourselves, but it was well worth it to know the process of doing that for ourselves, and it's given us a good result. Over here on the injector side, and it seems to be a really good combo with a nice, of course we've done all the P-pump modifications. I have just recently racked the barrels, and I need to go through and bench it a little bit to get them a little more even so that it smooths the engine back out. But it seems to be a good, strong combo paired with a set of diesel auto power 5x14 injectors. It has been port matched from the cylinder head to the exhaust manifold, and then from the exhaust manifold to the turbo. We have taken the time, I know this sounds ridiculous, but we polished with a small polishing kit the inside of the elbow, the boost elbow there, coming off the exit side of the turbo. And you can see a couple little things. This is, all in all, this swap is really easy to do. What gets time consuming is, and I say easy, it's easy if you're willing to do some work and do some fabricating. If we get down in here and we look at some of these things, there are a couple things. That is, you can see down in here, that this is the Hydro Boost type setup. We plugged off the vacuum port. We're just using the power steering, and that runs all of the braking setup. You can see the master cylinder. It runs the brakes and the power steering both. It's still routed back in. If we can switch angles over here, it's routed back in using a couple of reducers to get it to the right size to tee back into the factory setup. And then it runs down to the factory cooler for all the power steering and braking setup. That took a little bit of time to get that right for the power steering, just because you got to find out what the adapters are and all that. That really does take some doing. Temperature sensor, I don't know if we can get it in here, but we're going to try to. We had to make our own adapter. You can see how there's a little, this is a common rail so that the computer likes it. It's a common rail temperature sensor with a bushing that we found the right size for our Cummins 12 valve block, and then we drilled it out and then tapped it to accept the right thread pitch on the temperature sensor. Sorry, that's at a little bit of an angle there, but hopefully it gives you the idea. The computer likes that, it's in a good location, and we retain the temperature sensor on our instrument cluster. Speaking of which, underneath on the back of here, there's the traditional location for the oil pump, or the oil pressure sender, and we also retain that, so that gauge still does, even though it's a dummy gauge on these common rails, we still have that piped in, and it's working. Likewise, it's with a bushing to take it from a NPT thread to a metric O-ring thread, which it is on the common rail sensor that we've got hooked into the computer. Now, this is something that took a lot of time, and you can't see it very well. I apologize, but hopefully this will give you the idea. We made a bracket that bolts on to the shock tower over here. Hopefully you can see that. Just a flat bracket that bolts on right here using the bolts, and there's plenty of meat there. You still get a full thread. We made a bracket at a right angle, and it holds the computer with all the grounds and everything. It holds the computer so that you retain all of your factory gauges. Now, one of the other things that a lot of guys are worried about, speaking of gauges and whatnot and computers, is, let's see where we can get the best view of this. Okay, this will at least give us a decent view up underneath here. What we have here, let's see. Okay, what we have here, guys, I don't want to make you motion sick with all of this wobbling, but that right there is it's provided by dstroke.com, and it is basically it's a, oh man, I'm going blank on the name now. It's a tone ring. I'm sorry, guys. It takes the factory tone ring. It keeps the same tooth count, but it allows you to use a common rail, and that's just a common rail sensor right there that you see. Common rail sensor that we fabricated a bracket, put it on the oil pan here, a couple of right angles to get it over with some spacers, and that allows you to retain your factory tack in the dash with no errors. Very simple and clean setup. I did choose to extend my wires a little bit, so you can see I did cut it and add in a little bit of wiring, but it still works very well. We chose, because of fan routing, and I think it was Young Guns that originally did the work on this, if you use the common rail fan, it tends to rotate backwards, so that is a little bit of a bummer. We just have the factory stock 12 valve fan, and I have run this in the summertime, and here in Georgia, you know, it's 100 degrees with humidity, and it didn't overheat. I haven't tried pulling a huge load with it in the summertime, but I would imagine if you had the factory shroud back on it, it would probably do just fine. We routed a lot of, you can see there's a couple boost lines, some fuel pressure lines. We routed it all up to the top of it and then tried to string it over as cleanly as we can. And we've tried to use the shielding as much as we can. We're still running down a couple of little gremlins, and so we haven't got it all buried, but we will eventually have all of this shielded in black plastic shielding. And I don't want to influence anybody for good or ill on this, but I'll tell you what I found. I bought a brand new fuel shutoff switch. The solenoid, I had it mounted up. It lasted about 3 months, and then it toasted. So I just ran a Edelbrock choke cable. Hasn't switched over. I'm sorry, guys. It's a little bit dark in there. Yeah, there we can see it. Ran an Edelbrock choke cable to the shutoff, which I flipped around. Just made a little bracket using that. It's probably my least favorite piece in terms of the cleanliness of it. I just made a little hold down. It loops back around, and I'll show you. I'm sorry, it's going to ding for a second, but what I did is, because on a lot of the 12 valves, you'll see them where they're down on the floor. I hate having to reach down and shut something off. So I just drilled a nice clean little spot next to my key so that I can get to it quickly, and it works. It works like a champ. You leave it out, and if somebody doesn't know what it is, they can't steal your truck. Hope that doesn't come off as being too ghetto, but it really seems to be the best way to, and it is easy to wire into your key. I don't want to get that wrong. If you do want to use a fuel shutoff solenoid, I use the factory solenoid switch off of my 12 valve donor truck. It only took me about an hour to wire up. It's just that it gave me grief so quickly. I didn't, on a truck that is now as reliable as this is, I didn't want to ruin it. So in terms of what gauges will actually work, there's a lot of people that are talking about this and that and the other on what works. Let me show you real quick. I'll shut off my heat. I'm sorry for the ding. Okay, so there it is. My oil pressure works, my temperature works using the factory gauges, the speedometer works, RPMs are right on target with the correct tooth count, which I believe is a 60 minus 2. I need to verify that, but the guys at D-Stroke will have them listed. It is not the 36 count. It's got to be around that 60 minus 2 to give you the correct reading. The only one that I don't know why doesn't work, I think it has something to do with my computer and maybe a missing ground or something. My voltmeter is not reading correctly, but it does still charge. I do obviously, it throws about 1,000 codes, which never bother me because I don't run the code checker, but it says check gauges and the check engine light is on. My gas gauge still works fine, my odometer works fine, and if you retain the computer, you still get your temperature and heading. Now, obviously, it thinks that I get 99.9 miles to the gallon, which isn't true. This guy will get I get about 17 or so miles to the gallon, and I just pulled about a 10,000 pound trailer set up for 1,000 miles, and I got right about 13 miles to the gallon, which a motor with 0 miles on it, I figure that's not too bad. So showing you the key shut-off procedure here, obviously, hit my key, truck is completely off, and that's all there is to it. Up in this corner you can see I have the ISPRO pyrometer, boost, and fuel pressure. This comes from the Marine series. It gave us the look that we wanted in our truck and kept it clean with we wanted to be able to have enough boost if we ever go compounds that we can handle that. Hope this answers some of those questions out there. If you have a question and want to see a video of something, just leave it on the YouTube page, make a comment there, and I'll try to get a video up to show you, because some of this took, literally, my brother and I, we racked our brains for weeks trying to figure some of this stuff out. If we can help out anybody, get you along a little faster, we certainly will. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this and that it is going to help you out a little. Take care. Bye. Okay, wanted to make another quick one of these videos here about the common rail to 12 valve swap. As you can see here, I'm going to focus right now on the alternator setup. I just wanted to show you what's going on over here in case you were wondering. What we've done on the alternator on this side, you can see we've made some little jumpers from our factory harness. We color-coded the wires, a positive and a negative, and then a big hot wire that comes up and feeds the battery terminal. So just a positive, negative, and we put the positive on the top post and the negative on the bottom post, but we switched them and we couldn't find any difference in it. So that's how we have it right now. It doesn't show charging on my gauge in the truck, which I know a lot of other guys, they do get it to charge, but I think there's either something wrong with my computer or my gauge, but it does charge. I've never had a battery issue in this. So that's the alternator wiring setup. It's very simple. We're using the 12 valve alternator here, works with the 12 valve bracket, and obviously all 12 valve side components on this. Hope that helps out if you're wondering about the alternator on a 24 valve common rail to 12 valve swap.